Hello, welcome to the session Power BI Data Flows Beyond the Basics. I'm very sorry for the delay. I was adapting myself with the controls of the streaming on this session. My name is Torres. I'll talk about Power BI Data Flows. So let's start. That's me. I'm a data platform MVP. I'm a trainer with some Microsoft certifications. I'm the user group leader of Malta Data Platform User Group. Our site is full of technical content. You are very welcome to visit our site. And on the right side, you can see my contacts. All my contacts, feel free to connect. It will be a pleasure to connect. You can ask any questions and so on. Our agenda today. We'll see about Power BI ETL problem. Yes, because there is a problem. That's why the data flows arrived to solve this problem. How data flow works and demonstration. The Power BI ETL problem. These are two PBIX files. One PBIX of sales and one PBIX of inventory. But both PBIX have a date dimension. The date dimension is duplicated among the PBIS. That's not good. That's not interesting. This duplication is not good. It makes it difficult for development teams to really work together, to really share content and their work. That's the problem we have with the usual ETL on Power BI. What's the solution? The solution is to use data flows. We can use data flows in order to share the development. We remove the ETL part, the Power Query part, from the PBIX files. Instead of keep creating the ETL inside the PBIX, we will have the data flows and you create the ETL on the data flows in the portal, in the Power BI portal. And by doing so, we'll be able to share the development of the data flow, the development of the ETL. And how the data flow works. It's only available in app workspace in the portal. We can't create data flows in my workspace. We need an app workspace and then we'll be able to create the data flows. Each data flow can have many entities. We can create many entities in the same data flow. No problem with that. Each data flow can even have many data sources. We can access many different data sources on the same data flow. No problem with that. And one data flow can use another data flow as a source. This is very interesting because this enables us to create an entire architecture of data flows reusing data flows to reach our model, our desired model. And we can share information across a bigger enterprise between branches of the company, between departments of the company, and so on. So let's see how this works, how these features works. Let me open Power BI. Okay, sign in. I'll create a new workspace. Dev connections. So, here I have the workspace, dev connections, and now I can start creating data flows. I can see the option data flows here, and I can start creating data. Let's start data flows. I have four options to create data flows. Define entities is the basic flows. I want to ETL import some entities, so I'll go to entities. Add new entity. I'll choose a SQL Server database. But before that, it's interesting to understand that my database is on-premise. I will be using a database on-premise. I have here the AdventureWorks data warehouse on my on-premise environment. How the data flow from the portal will access my on-premise environment. In order to do that, we use a gateway. Manage gateways. So I have here settings and manage gateways. Here on manage gateways, I need to close the editor first. I need to get back a bit. So in manage gateways, I can see the gateway that I have on my local machine. And on this gateway, I have two connections defined. I have the AdventureWorks connection and the AdventureWorks DW 2016 connection. I have both connections defined. Let me just check the connection. These connections are on a local virtual machine called WorkVM, and my local virtual machine seems to be offline. Let's start my local virtual machine. It's starting. So I'll create the data flows in the portal while the local virtual machine is starting. I will open one Power BI file that I will use during this session. Let's leave Power BI opening. Here on this Power BI file, I have some queries, some ETLs that I will import later for the data flows. Sorry, the connections are not ready yet. Sorry for taking all this time. Let's check my virtual machine. Sorry for this delay. I was not expecting this delay. Match progress. It seems that at this moment while I'm transmitting the session, I'm not able to see the chat. I think it may be some questions on the chat or something like that, but I'll only be able to answer the questions after the end of the session. It's almost 96. It's interesting that the gateway to connect to our on-premise environment, the gateway uses the Azure Service Bus feature is another feature in Azure. We don't need to care too much about this, but this is a bit of internal details about how the gateway works. The gateway uses the Azure Service Bus, and if we go deeper on understanding how the Service Bus works, the fact is that we will discover that this connection the gateway makes to the on-premise environment is very safe. Is very safe. Service Bus has a very safe method to ensure the connection to the on-premise environment. Is very safe. And here it's not connected yet, but we can note that we have the data sources, and the data sources have the authentication information. But here we also have the tab with users. What this means? This is very interesting because this enables us to create a hierarchical uh, management control of the content of the portal, and this is needed in an enterprise environment. What I mean, for example, you have a portal administrator. The portal administrator will be responsible for the gateway itself. Will be responsible for the gateway. In fact, the portal administrator can hash the many gateways and can also delegate the administration of the gateway. Each gateway can have different administrators. So you have portal administrator who set up the gateway, and each gateway can be delegated to different administrators. The gateway administrator will establish connections and can delegate the responsibility of the connections to other users. He is delegating, in fact, the access to these connections for other users. These users here on the connection will be the developers capable to use this connection to access the data on premise. Since the authentication is already set on the connection level, the developers will be able to access the on-premise data don't need to know the connection information. The connection information can be kept as a secret. The users developing the Power BI solution don't need to have the connection information. They are allowed to connect through the gateway connection. That's it. They don't need to know exactly the details of how the connection is done. And considering this configuration, we will be making an hierarchical management of the portal and the access to the information. So we'll have a portal administrator who installs the gateways. It can delegate, he can delegate the management of each gateway to different administrators who will create the connections inside each gateway and delegate the access of these connections to developers who will access the connections to develop the data flows, dashboards, and all the Power BI objects needed. So now, since the machine is running, not able to connect yet, it's still starting. While the machine is starting, we can talk a bit more about the data flows types that we just saw here. We saw these data flow types, and I was only explaining the define new entities, which is the basic ETL. We want to get new entities and create a data flow. That's great. The second type is used to make a link between data flows, so we can reuse a data flow. Instead of making the direct ETL, we can get information from the data flow and make transformations over the entity, so we can link two data flows. That's very interesting and makes our environment even more powerful for an enterprise company. The import model, it means basically that we can export a data flow from one workspace and import the data flow in another workspace. It seems too basic, but mind that one workspace may be one branch of the company or one department. So we are talking about exchanging code between branches of the company and between departments, and that's very interesting. And this is also a starting point for a CI/CD environment to enable us to automate the deployment process of data flow, since we have import and export features. So we can start thinking about automating the process of the data flow deployment. And the last one, attach a common data model folder. Well, now that we are talking about data flows, we are talking about ETL. When we talk about ETL, export, transform, and load, we are not only talking about the process itself of extract, transform, and load. An ETL needs to keep a constant connection with the source. Every time a new information is created on the source, we need to import it again. Many times we'll be using incremental refresh for that. The data flows in Power BI don't mean only the process of transformation. It means also a schedule to keep track of the source, to keep the information updated. This last option, attach a common data model folder, is the opposite, because this option is basically delegating the task of the ETL to an external element, to an external tool. For example, the ETL could be made by Azure Data Factory. Azure Data Factory could make the ETL and store the result in a common data model folder in Azure Blob Storage. A common data model is a format to store the data. So Data Factory could store the data in a common data model folder, and by attaching to a common data model folder, Power BI would be able to get this data, but knowing that Power BI would not be responsible for the execution of the transformations. The execution of the transformations would be done only by an external tool. Data Factory is an example of this external tool. Let's take a look on the gateways again, and now we have a connection. My virtual machine is finally on, and we have a connection to AdventureWorks and AdventureWorks 2016, AdventureWorks DW 2016. Let's start our example creating a data flow. I will define new entities. SQL Server database. And I need to specify the server and the database. I use the name of my local environment. My virtual machine is called WorkVM, and the database Adventure Works. I got wrong. Adventure Works. Mind what's happening while I'm typing. The authentication was filled, but I'll continue to typing because I don't want the AdventWorks. I want the AdventWorks DW 2016. And again, when I finish typing the database name again, the authentication is filled. What this means? At this moment, I'm using, let's say, the hat of a developer. I'm a Power BI developer at this moment. I'm using the hat of a developer. And as a developer, I don't need to know the password used to connect to the on-premise environment. I don't need to know that. I don't need to know the details for the connection to the on-premise environment. I have no need. So, uh, all the details are filled for me. Once I define server and database, it identifies that this server and database are in the gateway and I have access to them. So it brings me the connection information and I don't know the connection information. Then I can only click next. By clicking next, it's connecting to my local machine, my on-premise environment, and it will bring to me all the tables of this database, so I can choose what I would like to include on this data flow. In a similar way like it's done with Power BI. So, sorry, I still have a connection problem with my virtual machine. Let's see what's happening. Everything's fine on my virtual machine. I can open SSMS to double check. WorkVM AdventWorks TW 2016. Next. It should be faster. I hope the recording is not cut on 45 minutes because I'll take a bit longer to complete the session. So let's start the SQL Server. SQL Server says it was not started. Okay, now I can click next. Let's start the connection with the on-premise environment to happen. It should not be too long, but since it's just started, it can take a while. Now we can see the tables of our on-premise environment. The table just went to the on-premise environment and got the tables. Now we are really starting. Let's choose two tables. I'll choose customers and products. Two tables and choose transform data. I can make the transformations here like in Power Query environment. It's Power Query, and you can see how similar the interface is to Power Query. It's basically Power Query, and to be hashing the steps that I'll be executing. Let's, for example, remove some columns that I don't need. On customers, I have Spanish occupation, French occupation, Spanish education, French education, and I remove these columns, remove columns, and notice how the steps are being recorded here at the side, exactly how it happens with Power Query. I'll change the name of these tables to customer and product, and I'll save and close. Validating queries. So I have my first data flow. The data flow contains the entities, customer, and product. And I need to give a name for the data flow. Let's give a name of customer flow. This data flow will be called customer flow. I'll click save, and it already suggests me to refresh the data flow. So it already get the data from the on-premise environment. It's refreshing this data flow. While it's refreshing this data flow, let's build another data flow. But the point is, we just saw that we have for the data flows, the UI is very similar, almost the same as Power Query. But I bet what you have in mind now is that aren't there limitations on that UI? Is that UI really possible, really able to do everything that Power Query can do? And would it be comfortable to work with Power Query on an online UI? Let's solve your doubts. Instead of creating the data flow from the UI, I'll get here from the Power BI file that I had open and edit one query. I'll get the geography table, and you already know that Power Query is based on M language. By the way, I just shared some content about the M language on my LinkedIn. People like it a lot. Let's see the advanced query. So I have here the script to retrieve the geography table. I'll copy this script and back to Power BI portal, I will create a new data flow. Define new. But this time, instead of choosing SQL Server database, I'll choose a blank query. Blank query. Let's add the query here. Select the gateway, my gateway. Next. So it's asking me to configure the connection. Okay, no problem. The problem is that it's asking me for the authentication. I'm the developer. I don't know the authentication. Why it's asking me for the authentication? Simple. We can come in view, advanced data, we'll return to the query, and the secret here is that the name of the server and the name of the database are sensible to the case of the letters. So I need to write them perfectly correctly. So OK. It will ask me again to configure the connection, but now when I go to configure connection, see, it identified that this server and this database are already set up in the gateway. So it brought the connection to me. Using the hat as a developer, I don't need to know how the gateway connects to the local environment. I don't need to know the authentication information. I just click connect and brings to me the information about geography. Okay, let's call this geography and click Save and Close. Validating queries. Now let's call our data flow geography flow. So we already saw one data flow with multiple entities. Now we are seeing one data flow with a single entity and with the code imported from the M code built on premise. And we have now two data flows, customer flow and geography flow. The customers live somewhere. They live somewhere. So there is a relation between customer and geography. And I would like to establish this relation, have this information together. So let's build a new data flow. One more data flow. But this time I would like to use the information that I have from previous data flows. So instead of define new entities, I use link entities from other data flows. I just click next because I'm reading data flows directly from Power BI. And it shows to me all my workspace. It seems something simple, but it's important to understand what implications this has for an enterprise environment. Let's imagine again, each workspace here can be a different branch of our company. Each workspace can be a different branch of the company or a different department. So if I'm able to link with data flows from different workspace, as long as it was giving me permission to do that, it means that I can share information between branches of the company or between departments of the company. Each branch can provide information for other branches. So I will get the dev connections. I will use the dev connections, workspace. And I have two data flows inside dev connections. I'll get only one table from the data flows, customer, and the other table from the other data flow, geography. And now I'll click transform data. So I have the customer and geography table. These dev connections brought to me the list of content of the workspace. I don't need that. I have the customer and the geography table. What I would like to do, I'll merge these tables. I'll merge these tables into a new table. It already advised me that since these are linked tables, I can't transform them, but I can create new content from them. I can merge queries as new. Then I choose customer, geography, and the linked field, geography key. And okay. So this is the result of the merge. Let's call this result as customer geo, customer geography. And here in the end I have the table geography. I need to expand the table and choose which fields I really would like to see. I would like to see city, state and province, and English country region name. This is enough to know where the customer lives. This is enough for me. Okay, so I use two other data flows to build this new data flow, merging customer and geography. That's great. Then I'll click Save and Close, validating queries. It asks me the name of this flow. Let's call this flow customer due flow. Save. And the message that you see here on the top is a bit disappointing because it's advising us that to make these links between entities, between different flows, we need to use premium capacity, a premium subscription, and we use it to usually we don't have a premium subscription. If you already tried this, you may be thinking now, oh, I told you, I knew you would be limited by premium capacity, by the need of premium capacity. But that's not true. That's one secret that I show you. You don't need premium capacity to make this work. But before showing the solution, I would like to show another very important feature. Is a feature called View Lineage. We are talking a lot about using these workflows in an enterprise environment. So different branches, different departments will be able to provide their own set of data to be consumed by the rest of the company. In a situation like this, view lineage is very important for us to understand how our data is trustworthy. We can take a look on the source of the data. We can check that the customer due flow is coming from the geographic flow and customer flow, which are coming from SQL servers, which could be two different SQL servers. So the lineage feature is a very important feature for us to keep track of the data in an enterprise environment and know exactly if that data is trustworthy or not. That's very important. But now, to solve our problem related to premium capacity, let's edit this data flow again. Let's go back to the queries. The secret here in relation to premium capacity is that I'm loading the two linked tables and I'm making a transformation with them. By doing both, I need premium capacity, but I can make the transformation without loading the tables. I can disable load of these tables. It means that the table from the order flow will be only used to make a transformation, but will not appear on the final result of this new data flow. And when we do that, when we disable the load of the table, of the linked table, this data flow doesn't require premium capacity anymore. See, I don't have more the alert message and I can refresh my data flow without any problem. It's already refreshing. So now I can work without the requirement of premium capacity. That's good, but the bad news is that, unfortunately, the lineage feature doesn't work when we disable the load of the entities. Then you may think, oh, so the lineage will only work well in premium capacity. No, this is a huge, in my point of view, this is a huge bug, because even on premium capacity, there will be many situations where I would like to transform the entities from another data flow without loading them. I would have no need to load them. I just would like to transform them. And not being able to see lineage is a very considerable flaw. Another important feature for an enterprise environment I can see on the settings is called endorsement. What's this? Again, we are talking about enterprise environment. We are talking about different branches, different departments providing information for each other. So you are working on one of these branches or one of these departments. How would you know what data is trustworthy and what data is not trustworthy? So the endorsement feature has two levels of endorsement besides the non, the data is not endorsed. Two levels of endorsement. We have the promoted. The promoted is used when the developer himself is saying, my data is correct and it's able to be reused by you. So the developer is promoting that data source and making that data source available to be used by other developers. But does this ensure the data is trustworthy? Not necessarily. The developer may have made mistakes while building the data flow. So we have the second option, is the certified option. In this case, the developer of the data flow needs to demand a certification from a third person. Some data specialist inside the company would need to certify that that data flow is absolutely correct. So, using certified data flows, you would be sure that the data from that data flow is correct. It depends on the companies establishing a certification process for the data built in Power BI, built in data flows of Power BI. Let's open another Power BI file. And here in a new Power BI file, I can use the option to get data. Get data, and I can ask to get data from data flow. Here, Power BI data flows. It will show me the data flow options on my Power BI portal, again showing to me the workspace that we have, that I have access to, and I'll choose my customer gel flow. What this means? This means that now I'm able to build the ETL outside the PBIX files, even creating an ETL architecture with pieces of ETL reusing other pieces of ETL, data flows reusing data flows, and the end developers, the dashboard developers, will be able to consume this data, reuse the ETL process without need to know more in how the ETL is built. Someone will be responsible to build the ETL, and someone will be responsible to build the dashboards and reports in the front end. So we can break the work among a data analysis team that will be responsible to complete the entire tasks. That's what the data flows, the Power BI data flows, are capable of. Let me get to PowerPoint. So, thank you very much for attending this session. You can see here on PowerPoint as soon as I can open it. You can see my contacts here on PowerPoint. Feel free to connect. Feel free to ask me any questions. And now I'll be able to take a look on the chat and see the questions that you have, and I'll be answering the questions on the chat. But if I miss something, please feel free to connect and ask me anything through my contacts. Thank you very much for attending this session.